Look at that plant. I want you to know that everything was grown in my garden. Don't touch that plant!
Is it poisonous?
She'll become part of the plant.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Flower Power Garden Hour. I'm your host, Marlene, along with the other host, the co-host, my co-host, Bruce, the botanist.
Hey, everybody.
This is the July to-do list, right? And Bruce, anytime I say this, I always like to say, remember, we're coming from it from a zone 9. So if you're in a different zone, it may be different, maybe a lot different, but there's probably going to be some overlap. And if you don't know the zone you're in, go ahead and look up USDA. They'll give you the zones you're in. And that way you could sort of see what's happening and what needs to be done in your area. But usually, roughly, a lot of this is the same. There's some caveats there. So Bruce, do you want to get started with what's to be done in the July garden?
Sure. So first of all, I'd like to say that since it's midsummer it's early summer, but it's starting to be summer in most of the country, summer weather, most of us will have very similar conditions. It's just a matter of degree. Is it going to be super hot or is it going to be hot and humid or hot and dry? But we're all getting hot.
Yes. Are you going to have rain or no rain? Right. Yeah.
For us, it's not going to rain. They record the weather forecast.
Or do you, and the big thing is, do you get an early frost? You know,
Yes.
Usually what you're doing now, it's sort of dictated by when do you get your first frost? When is fall coming? So even though it's just summer, we're already thinking about fall.
Yeah, it's sad. We gardeners, we just are so sad.
We're not in the
We're
moment.
in the middle of summer and we're already thinking of fall.
I know. We don't live in the moment. We really do need to live more in the moment. Who cares what's going to happen in fall? I'm gardening for the now.
Right.
But, I mean, there's both. You enjoy your garden now, and then you just plan. Okay,
Right.
so what would you say is your top thing you're doing in your garden now? Or
Well, of course.
should be? Yours is very specific, or, you know.
I guess I would say the top thing is to go through your garden every day. You should do that anyway because that's your joy. But also look for things that are starting to dry out because maybe the sprinkler didn't hit them right, or maybe some other plant got in the way and it's blocking the water. But every day I go through my plants and I check to see what's drying out towards the middle of the day, especially, even if the sprinklers went on. And I always find something. So I think it's really important to be careful, to be watching your garden every day, looking for obviously drying plants or any sudden changes.
That's true. And I do want to say, though, say you watered and you knew your irrigation went off the day before or that morning, and you come home and you're walking through your garden and you see let's say your pumpkin plant, the leaves are drooping, or you have a tomato plant and the leaves are drooping. Remember, that's normal. If it's very hot and dry out, that's a defense mechanism. So always check the soil moisture because you never know.
Right.
Because wilting could be caused by overwatering, and it's possible to still overwater something, especially, if it's in the shade. It doesn't get as much sun. So dig down a little bit. But yeah, it's always a good idea just to inspect. Like at work, we have students who water, but I feel like I'm like, let me water today because that makes me slow down and it makes me focus almost every single plant. And that's what I
Right.
really see that needs to happen.
And of course, by drying out, what I'm specifically saying is looking at the soil. I will also say that if you have a plant that was beautifully turgid and strong yesterday, and today you look at it and it's wilting and the soil is moist, you might want to consider, let's just say in the case of a squash plant, you might want to consider you might have borers or something that's getting at the stem of the plant, and therefore the plant is not pulling up water.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There could be a lot going on. Yeah. Especially if you have just random branches dying. It could be anything.
Right.
Okay. So I'm going to go through a list of what's to plant. And of course, it's July. It's peak heat. Plants generally don't prefer to be planted in heat because, their roots need to get established to pick up water, and you're damaging the feeder roots and the little root hairs picking up water. Is it doable? Yes. Is it recommended? No. So I would say perennials, wait until the fall, wait until it cools off. but you can still plant some flower seeds now, direct sow sunflowers, zinnias, because we have a late season, late frost. So some of these things you could plant and they'll keep blooming in. And this is what gets a lot of people is right now, late July into August is when you could start your fall winter vegetables like
Right.
broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, and cauliflower. So here we are in peak July, just maybe harvesting tomatoes for the first time, and we're thinking about our winter vegetables. So if you like to start them by seed, go ahead and get your seeds now. Start planting them late July. I mean, you could direct sow them, but if you have a lot of vegetables in already, you may not have the space and they may pop up sooner than you would like. So I don't know. It's good to start them inside. You could still plant some beans, pumpkins. It's still not too late. And of course, squash. You could probably get another round of squash.
Easily you can plant zucchini squash now
Mm-hmm.
because that is a very short crop. I think that there are varieties that fruit in under 50 days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Usually it's the first thing I rip out of my garden because it's the first thing that fruits and it's starting to look bad and I'm really over the zucchini by then. So
I've been over the zucchini for several years.
yeah, this was the year I wasn't going to plant it and I just couldn't do it. I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why would I not plant? So I bought 2 plants. I'm like, there you go. I feel better. I planted
better.
zucchini. I don't know why. I'm like, I planted zucchini there. So really, as far as planting, just, if you are going to plant something, make sure you really soak it in. Don't rely on the drippers that you have for an established garden. You really need to just hand water them in. Speaking of watering, if you have young trees, you want to make sure you deep water those. That's about 10 gallons for each watering. You can put the little berm and dump, 2 buckets full or put a hose by it and let it drip for a few hours. Because you really want to get the water down. Just relying on lawn sprinklers isn't going to really get the water deep down for the roots to go.
And if you dump a whole bunch of water on the plant in one shot, there's a good chance a lot of it's just going to run off, especially if your plant is planted slightly on a mound.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's why just the hose and, you move it around every few hours. Yeah. Or you do the little, build the berm, but even then,
And by the way, I agree with planting beans this time of year. There are bush beans and there are pole beans. And bush beans, they recommend to plant every 2 weeks, at least on the seed packets. Pole beans, I'm not sure what the packets say, but I do them just once a month. I find that pole beans really produce for a long period of time. But they do take longer to produce. So while I say you could probably do a September 1st sowing of pole beans, you might find that if it starts to get cold in November, they're not too happy, but you'll probably get some beans.
Beans, I don't really like green beans. So this is usually if I don't like something, I don't put a lot of effort in, but I'll grow beans, but I think the leafhoppers get them a lot. And so the plants always look speckled and awful. And then I always harvest way too late. So I like the Chinese long beans, the ones that are really long, like 2 feet long.
Yes, you don't need to grow as many.
No.
Well, you don't. It's easier to harvest because you only need to harvest like 10 of them.
Exactly.
And that's a meal.
I think, I think I always let the beans go too long. I'm like, oh, you're not ready yet. And then when I cut it, it's like leathery. I don't know. I'm just not a big bean fan, so I don't put as much effort into it.
Well, if I'm not a zucchini fan, I'm not a bean fan. And, eggplant is like a pain in the neck to cook.
I love eggplant.
You know it. I'm just growing fruit.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, sometimes I'm like, I wish they could all just be watermelons. But
Yes.
yeah, I see, and I love eggplant. And I mean, I grow things I definitely don't like just to grow them. But beans, if you have them not doing well for pest reasons, and then I'm not a big fan of them, and then I'm like, well,
That's right.
whatever. Yeah.
Well, when I was at the community garden, the person next to me grew, I'm going to say 400 square feet of okra.
Yeah.
And, to me, 400 square feet of okra, you might as well just cut out the middleman and just put the plants into the compost heap to begin with, because I am not personally a fan of okra. Some people love it.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's fried, because it's fried, but it still has that slime. People love
It's
it.
slimy.
It's slimy. It's a beautiful plant. I mean, I grow it, but see, I grow like 2 of them, and you need a lot to harvest a lot.
Well, yeah,
Yeah, it's a pretty plant. I like it for the flowers, but
it is beautiful.
yeah.
Now, as far as perennials and shrubs, generally, my understanding is if you're going to plant your shrubs or perennials, you certainly can't do anything that's bare root. But if things are in pots
hmm
and you're disturbing that root ball minimally, and your soil is good quality soil, and you're watering, you should be okay. Although I do recommend planting late in the day
You
because at least that way, you don't burn the first day.
you should be okay, and I definitely do it. And but you have to be set up like you said. But I think the main thing is people who don't want to hand water in and rely on the established irrigation. So in the fall, the temperatures are cooler, so you could get away with that, or we might be going into the rainy season. So if you put something in the ground and you water it in, but say you don't go back for 4 days, it could be a goner.
Mm,
If it's really hot and dry. Another thing that happens and people don't like is, you may have top, if something's herbaceous, the whole top may die down and people think they killed it. So,
yeah.
there's a lot of foliage. So it's definitely doable. I do it. I just don't recommend it. And you need more water. So if we're trying to save water, maybe that's a way to do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing it. I know that. I've done it.
Well,
I work
I'm
with.
doing it because it's taken me about a year and a half to pull out the ivy and landscape fabric. And here I am in the middle of the season. I don't want to lose a year.
Mhm.
So my feeling is, I grew a lot of seed grown perennials this year. I don't want to hold them for another year.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I will plant them. And, I have so many that I can plant them 3 in a bunch. And if 2 survive, I still get a nice
Yeah.
grouping.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's the issue if you don't want to lose a year.
Yeah.
And that's
No,
always
I
important.
agree. Okay, I'm just going to run through a few more things. Of course, weed control. Try not to let things go to seed. If it's even if you just have to knock the flowers off or the seed heads, do that because that will prevent the seeds from going basically getting in your soil and growing. So if that's all you could do that. And we talked about weed eating and you could smother them, but there's going to be weeds and you want to put them when they're young, or like Bruce and I discussed, having weeds, you're going to have them. Is it problematic? Only when they start taking over the plant, and some of them can. They are going to compete. They're going to compete for moisture. They're going to compete for space and nutrients. But if you have a few here and there and you're okay with it, that's fine. The problem is they could get out of hand.
Right.
They're opportunistic plants and they grow really well. They
And I
outcompete
think
most things.
Bermuda grass is the classic example of that.
Mhm.
That you go away, gee, it's summer. I think I'm going to go to Paris for the week.
Mhm.
And I go away on a Saturday and I forgot to weed the Bermuda grass before I left. And I get back and I have 2 feet of Bermuda grass. Well,
Mhm.
that is a problem. And that is one that really gets away from you very quickly.
It can. And then, and then you have to pull all the rhizomes. That's like when I went on vacation. It might have actually been to Paris for the Tour de France. I came back. It wasn't Bermuda, but I had the perennial morning glory, and
Yes.
which is it's a weed, but it was so pretty. It grew in through our condo wall, and when we came home, it was inside the house.
Well, nothing says a plant person like weeds growing inside the house.
I mean, it
between
was
your
a pretty
walls.
one. I mean, that's borderline. Some people, grows like a weed. It's very invasive if you've seen it. But yeah, I'm like, okay, you came inside the house. You need to go bye-bye now.
I had
So-
weeds growing in the trunk of my car.
Yeah. Well, I had little seedlings of succulents because I have enough soil in there. So when a leaf fell off of like an echeveria, it started growing.
Yeah,
So it's fine.
yeah.
Yeah. Apparently at work, there's this cluster. Someone planted a cluster of bamboo, spreading bamboo, and the building's 3 feet tall. And apparently there is it's growing up through the 3rd floor somehow. So
Do you know that bamboo is now, my old New York neighbors told me it's now illegal to plant bamboo on Long Island, as it should be.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Well-
it's the spreading bamboo is
Right.
really difficult to get rid of. I mean, have you tried digging up bamboo roots? It's
They are hard as
impossible.
rock.
It's impossible. Oh my God. It's like, yeah, it's really
And
difficult.
And my
Yeah.
neighbors actually told me. So after I moved out, I had bamboo. I had it kept it well controlled. The new neighbors, the new owners did not. My neighbors told me that ultimately they had to get a backhoe
Oh
into the
yeah. Oh my
backyard
God.
to remove all the
I
bamboo.
believe that. Yeah. And even with those bamboo barriers, I wouldn't trust that at all.
No,
Just
in fact, and by the way, clumping bamboo will spread too. It's
it,
just slower,
it's
but
slower.
it
Yeah.
will take over eventually.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So we did weeds. You're gonna want to watch for pests. That's sort of like you going around. You sort of want to just monitor, and most of these pests aren't going to cause a problem, but it's good to get them when they're not huge numbers because
Right.
it's the numbers that are going to be the problem. So something like aphids, not a problem. Whiteflies, problem. You're going to want to just, monitor for those. There's not much you could do besides hose blasts, soap sprays. Some of these big footed, like your cucumber beetles, your leaf footed bugs. Really, it's just hand picking off your Hooplea beetles on your roses, anything like that, where, you try soap spray and they're just going to be like, oh, thanks for the shower and the soap. I'm
We don't
clean
have a
now.
Japanese beetle problem
We
here
don't
yet.
yet. Yet.
Back east, Japanese beetles are amazing with how
Hmm.
quickly they respond. They grow.
You could use
And
that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, people put the Japanese beetle traps in. They are filled with beetles within a week. Um, and there's really nothing you can do with them other than just don't. They love roses.
Hmm.
You're going to just have
Yeah.
them or don't grow 'em.
I think there's something called milky spore
Yes.
that you could apply to the soil, right? And it'll take care of the larvae.
Right. So the
I don't,
grubs is where you really want to
yeah.
stop them. Once they're flying,
Yeah. And I
you
think
know.
beneficial nematodes, I think there's beneficial nematodes. I don't know if that's the name of what really milky spore is. I don't know what the name, but I don't know if the milky spore is actually a fungus that attacks or if that's what they're just naming the nematodes. But yeah, there
Yeah,
are ways.
it's been a while since I had to deal with them.
Yeah, no, we don't have them here. Thank goodness.
But
We have other things. So just monitor and really it's your goal isn't to be pest free. It's to just keep numbers lower, and usually the beneficials will take care of that. A little bit of a hose blast, hand
right.
picking will take care of that.
So,
Go ahead.
I think we talked a little bit. We were talking about watering,
Mhm.
and I would like to also say that you need to check your sprinklers at least every few weeks to make sure that they're hitting the areas you need. But also, as the season goes on, you might want to adjust the watering times in your sprinklers. For instance, I have a very clay soil. Now, my soil is drying out a lot, but if I just increase the amount of time that I'm watering, the water's probably just going to run off anyway. Even though it's clay soil, it
Mhm.
doesn't soak in well, and it just makes puddles. So, one of the things that was recommended in my irrigation course is that when you set your sprinkler up, see how long it takes for the water to start to puddle. Let's just say it takes 10 minutes, but you need to water 40 minutes for the day to meet your watering needs. Well, if you have 4 zones, you set it to go to 10 minutes 4 times. So it'll go through each of your four
Mhm.
zones, and then
Mhm.
it'll come back and the water will absorb in the meantime. And that's really important so that you're actually getting the water in the plant and not on the street.
Yeah. And we have our automation in one of our greenhouses set up so it's pulses. So it doesn't fill up the whole pot and overflow the pot. So it pulses, fills up, and then drains through. And then,
Right.
so yeah, it's always good to know how much water you need and not waste water and get the water to where it's going.
And just remember that we're saying not that you water 10 minutes a day every
Yes.
day. We're
Yes.
saying that you water 10 minutes 4 times a day
Mhm.
instead of 40 minutes once a day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then you may not need to do that. You may only need to do that once a week or twice a
Right.
week or,
Deep, infrequent watering is what's
yes,
best for
that's
most plants.
exactly. Okay, so a few things: deadhead flowers, your annual flowers, just your roses. That way, some of them they'll just keep growing and growing, and you'll have longer flowers. And it looks nicer too. Shade tomatoes and peppers if needed. Definitely peppers, tomatoes. If you have a healthy bushy plant, the plant itself will shade your tomatoes and you won't get the sun scald. Peppers generally aren't, they're not as green and lush, and your peppers definitely could be cooked. So even though the plants take full sun, They do better with the little bit of shade.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've never actually had an issue with tomato scald, even here.
Mm-hmm.
But so, what sort of shade for our peppers should we use?
I mean, you could do as simple as 20% or 30%. You don't want to go too heavy because you don't want to prevent, the sun.
Right.
But even if it's something where it only gets morning sun and will get afternoon shade, so you could have 6 hours and it could get the morning sun, but in the afternoon it's in shade. That's fine.
Right.
Um,
But I would say here by 1 o'clock, I'm thinking,
yeah.
I mean, that's theoretically it's daylight saving time. That's noon, but
Hmm.
I think the sun starts to burn pretty early
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the sun comes up. If it comes up, so I mean, 6, 7, it's not as intense. But yeah, by 1 o'clock, you could get some burn there. So definitely by 2 o'clock, you definitely want
Yeah.
some shade going on there. And you could even put like an umbrella so it's angled. You just want the airflow. You don't want to put it so close that
And
it's.
because what says crazy plant person like having umbrellas in your
Well,
vegetable
yeah,
garden?
exactly. Hey, sometimes if that's all you have, it's pretty easy, right?
And
Yeah, go
since
ahead.
we're talking vegetables, it's also time if you're starting to get cucumbers and squash or zucchini squash, it's time to start picking them before they become baseball bats.
But what if you want baseball bats? Yeah.
Well, there is that Alfred Hitchcock
Yeah.
episode where the person kills her husband with a frozen roast and
Oh,
then serves it to the police. So
oh,
there may be use for those
maybe you.
baseball
Yeah.
bats, if you're
Yeah.
into that stuff.
Yeah. I-
Um,
Uh,
but I think the point is that zucchini become bitter
oh,
and seedy, and as do cucumbers,
cucumbers. Yeah.
and they're not really enjoyable. And the seeds in a zucchini, at least you can sort of pull them out. But in a cucumber, if you pull out the seeds, you have nothing more than cucumber O's.
Yeah. The cucumbers could go bitter really fast. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. And then,
And
I mean, squash too, but usually you mix it with something. So I don't notice it as much. But like cucumbers, I like to just eat by themselves. And you're like, oh boy.
right.
Yeah.
And pick some young and make yourself refrigerator pickles,
Oh,
which
I
are
love to
not
do that.
like pickles that have to take 6 weeks in
Oh,
a
no.
bucket.
Yeah.
You put them on a Monday, and by Wednesday you have really nice pickles.
Yeah.
It's very quick.
Or you take existing pickle juice and you just cut them up and put them in the jar.
I never thought of that. Gee. And here I am buying allspice and pepper and this and anise and this and that,
Oh,
and black mustard
yeah.
seeds and yellow.
Yeah. I mean, I've done that. Yes, I've done that. And I've done that with zucchini too, even large
Yes.
zucchini. And I like it almost better because it stays firmer in the jars.
And it doesn't, it does preserve it. It doesn't go bad. And it provides you with your weekly supply of salt.
Yeah. True. And then you could drink the juice if you're really dehydrated.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
pickle
just
juice.
remember that with your other cucurbit family,
Mm-hmm.
like melons and watermelons, you do not pick them until they're ripe, which for some of those melons can be difficult to tell, which
Oh,
probably we'll go into later in the
we'll
season.
go into later. Yeah, we'll go into that because I don't want to jump ahead too much
Right.
on that. I do want to talk about, okay, I'm just going to say real quick, do this because I don't, which is wet and turn your compost. If you're really trying to get your compost quick, it needs moisture. So if it's not getting moisture, you need to wet your compost during the summer. You should turn it for aeration. And I'm going to mention before we go into I have a missed your plants question mark that I'm going to like sort of lob off to you. But another one that is a big question mark, and I was doing some more research on it, is, a few years ago, I started hearing about, prune your fruit trees in the summer.
I've heard about summer fruit trees.
Yeah, and I've never really, in the fall when they're dormant or late spring, you prune to get rid of, thin them out, shape them, get rid of dead, get rid of any, suckers you should do year round, shorten them basically to make them look nice and be productive. And then it's like, summer pruning, go ahead and just, you cut them down, the height down. And I'm like, well, one, I don't want to be on a ladder pruning in July
Right.
or August. So I'm doing research, and what is the reason? I keep hearing, it's better for the fruit set. And then there's different things. Prune it before you harvest the fruit. And so it turns out for like apples, they're saying, and this would be a big thing, is getting sunlight to the fruit for the red coloring of anything that reddens up. It will need the sun. So An apricot's definitely not going to need that. In fact, midsummer, your apricots are going to be done.
You're going to kill them.
You're going to
Also,
kill
if
them,
you
and
prune them, you're going to scold them.
that's the other thing. And so some of this came out from, areas where it's obviously cooler and you don't have that sun intensity because you want some of this foliage to shade your fruit. So there's that. And then it was to possibly allow for a better like flower set. So I read some Penn State research, a guy who did his PhD on this, because apparently the idea of summer pruning goes back to the 1860s. And really the only benefit they saw for is the red pigment, and it decreases the trunk taper. So you get a slowdown of the trunk building up, which to me is almost a negative, but it doesn't do anything for the vigor, doesn't do anything for the fruit set or the flower set. If someone wants to do it because they didn't get around to pruning in spring and fall and the tree's too tall, yeah, you could do it.
Well, and you don't want to wait too long on a tree becoming too tall, because then when you prune it back, you're taking off a lot of the buds for next year's fruit. Not the buds, but the branches that are going to be.
Yeah, and you're not trying to remove all, and the idea is not to remove the whole year's growth on it, so you don't have any fruit set. But so I haven't really gotten why. Now, I know you don't want to prune certain fruit trees in the peak of the wet season. They do much better when it's dry, but that's completely different. So I'm still on the fence.
That might be more of a fungus issue.
That's
right?
more of a fungus issue. So I'm still on the fence. I never prune my fruit trees in the summer. I don't want to be out there in the heat doing that. So
I've been doing it, but not pruning. So I have found that the so-called dwarf fruit trees are so-called dwarf fruit trees. So I find that if it says it can be limited to 5 to 10 feet, it's going to be 15 feet if I do nothing.
Yes.
So what I started doing is pinching back to some degree. Like if I have a nectarine, and I want the fruit to be my head height and lower. So once it hits about 5 feet, or maybe a little higher, it starts to set up, some very long stems. I'll cut them back. I think that does two things. First of all, it keeps the height down for the future, and it does promote side growth, which theoretically I think will help develop those flowering spurs better.
Yeah, but so I mean, I've had people on for pruning before, but usually, in my opinion, when you pinch something back, that causes bushiness, which then isn't the ideal way you want to prune, because you want aeration. So if you just keep pinching back every branch, you're going to have just this big lollipop. So the way you sort of vigorate is you do more thinning cuts versus heading cuts. So you're doing heading cuts. I recommend doing more thinning cuts.
Well, but I do in the winter, I do my thinning cuts.
Okay. So you're just trying to get it bushier and more green. Right. And that's the thing. You might be promoting more green now, more photosynthetic material, more sugars being basically there to go in for the next year's fruit. So, I mean, that's the theory
what
there.
I do is, I have the 3-in-1 plants. So and I know that we all say that usually ends up being two. But let's just say we get all three to survive. What I do is in the fall, I took each one. These are first year plants. I took each one of the plants and I let them grow to have 3 branches on each of the 3-in-1 plants. Then after the season is over, I will thin them down even more. But the problem I have is that they grow so amazingly fast that if I don't summer prune, I will have 10-foot tall plants before I know it. So I'm not really pinching back. I'm cutting back.
Okay. Yeah.
Is the way you have to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, if you don't, it's fine. If you do, just be cautious of exposing the fruit and any foliage to summer heat. And that's it. And don't prune too much, because you don't want to prune off next year's potential fruiting wood. And so
which is why I like to get them early, so that if I wait too long, then I might be pulling off the fruiting wood.
Yeah.
And of course, remember to thin out the baby fruits till you have as much as you think you want for the season. Meaning if you have 500 little nectarines, and you know you're going to eat 50 of them. Well, trim them down to 100 so you can give some away.
Well, actually,
But
I should mention thinning fruit because if they're touching, they're not going to grow to their potential. So
right.
you need to
And
remove them.
I think generally I would say for plants, if you do notice they have a little fruiting spurs, which are nothing more than shorter stems coming off the main stem where the flowers form. If you have enough of them, 2 fruit per is plenty.
Yeah, if you have a vigorous plant, yeah. I mean, I get it. It's hard to pull fruit off because you're like, oh, but you're gonna have better fruit. Okay, let's get to the last thing I have, which I put miss plants ? And anytime someone says, oh, I have a house plant and I missed it once. And I'm like, well, that's like I go outside and I missed myself once when it's 110. But I think we briefly talked about how you're growing your house plants from your plant room, which are a lot of aeroids and tropical plants and begonias that are high humidity loving plants. You moved them outside for the summer and you have a mist system because our humidity is about 20% in the summer?
I think it's pretty bad. 20%, 25%.
Or good, depending on how you look at it, right?
And 105 degrees and 20% humidity is not a recipe for a happy begonia or a happy philodendron.
No. So I don't recommend misting any plant unless it is something that is generally grown as a house plant and you've moved it outside. And then I don't recommend just once. I recommend setting up a mist system like you did.
All right. Now, misting is a double-edged blade because I do have a misting system. It's very touchy to get that thing just the way you want it to be perfectly balanced so that it goes on for a few seconds, goes off for a few minutes, it tends to over mist. So some things do get overwatered. But I still feel that these types of plants can tolerate overwatering a lot better than they can tolerate low humidity. At least, again, the type of plants that I'm growing.
Yeah. Yeah. And your misters are just going off a little bit. So it's not like we're like flooding them. They're just going, yeah. So, So if that's,
I just want to add one thing to that. It's actually after the misters go off when they're just dripping out little drips of water as the water's draining. That's where I get most of my overwatering situations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the trade-off. These are your babies. You move them outside so they could survive, but you're doing it smart. But misting anything else, it doesn't need to happen. You don't need to mist your tomatoes.
Don't miss the garden plants.
Yeah. Your tomatoes don't need to be misted. I know someone who is like, oh, and I missed my peppers. And I'm like, well, it's probably working because it dries off, but really quick, but it's not needed. It's not needed. So that's sort of my list. It's just, gearing up for fall. I know bulb catalogs are coming. You're a big bulb grower. So, start buying your fall seeds, your bulbs for the fall, put their order in. 'Cause sometimes, the ones you want sell out.
Yes, I've noticed, and I get the daffodil catalog. It's online, and I've noticed all the cool new ones, even if they cost like $6 a bulb, they're sold out because they really are different than your run-of-the-mill, King Alfred daffodil.
Yeah. Okay, let's get on to some questions.
Sure.
I'm going to read them, and then we will give our opinions, and our not even opinions. This is our information. This is proven information. Now, some of it will be opinions. Okay. Can you trim hibiscus plants? And if so, when and how far? And this is by Diana. Now, my first question is probably going to be your first question.
Are these tropical hibiscus? Are these perennial hibiscus?
Exactly.
Is it a rose of Sharon?
Exactly. That's it. But for the most part, it's the same. But there are definitely some, there's a lot of different hibiscus out there. So yeah. So let's just assume it's the tropical hibiscus, which is your hibiscus Rosa sinensis. Thank you. Syriacus is the Rosa Sharon. So you have hibiscus Rosa sinensis, which is the tropical one. Evergreen does okay for the most part, as long as you don't have it out in the open where it will freeze. The low humidity can prevent the flowers from opening up sometimes. They can get thrips and aphids, but generally they do okay. Now, because pruning isn't necessarily an issue with them, you don't need to prune them. If you want to shape them, you could prune them. Ideally, will be in the spring or the fall to remove anything. I don't recommend pruning them really far down every time you prune because it's going to take a while for them to grow back. Now, at work, we grow a whole bunch in 5-inch square pots in a greenhouse, and they bloom at that size. So,
They'll bloom early. You go to the plant store and you'll see them in small pots blooming.
yeah.
But I would say I would not recommend too much pruning or even cutting back on hibiscus after spring because it takes, even in our climate, it takes a long time into the season before you start to get flowers if you're talking about last season's plants. Mine are not blooming yet.
No, yeah. I think the oldest plant we have in our collection at work is a hibiscus in our walkway. I think it's from the early 1960s.
How cool.
I know. So yeah, they don't need to be pruned to thin them out, to shape them, avoid pruning too close to the heat, avoid pruning them too close to the frost. And now the difference is the rows of the hibiscus syriacus, which is the Rosa Sharon, which is the deciduous one, which I think is underplanted in this area. That's deciduous, so you want to prune that before the leaves come out, but it doesn't matter. It's just easier to see. That could be trained into a single-trunked, pretty large tree or a multi-trunked shrub.
And there are new ones out that look a little more like tropical hibiscus. The flowers are a little bigger. They have a little bit more variation. I don't remember the names, but they have a little more variation in the color of each flower. So they look like almost a smaller tropical hibiscus flower.
And then you have, and I can't pronounce it, the hibiscus moesh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The perennial one.
You have the perennial deciduous ones, the ones that die completely down to the ground and then come back up, which you don't see a lot of in this area. And I don't know if it's because of the cold kills them off or they just rot out in the ground in the winter.
It's not the cold.
No, it's the heat.
Because they grow in New York.
Okay. It's probably the rotting out then, I'm guessing.
Well, I will say that I've had them here and it just didn't flower well.
Okay.
I will
So
say
heat,
that.
maybe the heat and yeah, they're beautiful because those flowers are like enormous.
Oh, they're like 10 to 12 inches.
And I've tried them, and there was one at a nursery the other day, and twice I've seen it, and I'm like, don't buy it, because I know it's not gonna grow.
Yeah, maybe they don't like the dry heat.
I think they don't like the dry heat.
Because,
Yeah.
On the East Coast, people have these, and, the botanical gardens have them. They're phenomenal.
Oh yeah, and I will say there is a California native hibiscus.
Aha.
It's white with a dark center. And of course, I'm forgetting the name of it. I had it in my garden. We had it at work. It blooms early on, and that's it. And it tends to like a little bit more water, even though I grew it pretty drought tolerant. It was shorter lived. But there is a native one, and it's pretty. It looks like a tropical hibiscus, but it's white. So it's fun. I mean, we have a native hibiscus. Who would have thought?
And strangely enough, it's called Hibiscus californicus.
Did you look it up, or you just guess?
did.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and I'm like, is it Hibiscus californicus? It is.
With Laziocarpos.
There,
I don't know.
Lazio. That's it. That's the Laziocarpus. Yep, that's the one I couldn't remember. So,
And
yeah,
the flowers are pretty,
they're
it's
pretty.
white. And
Yeah.
Marlene and I have noticed the rule of if you have a really cool plant, the one that is easiest to grow is the least attractive of all the flowers. Not that there's anything wrong with a white flower.
No.
But the one that's hardest to grow has the coolest.
Oh, it has the biggest gaudy flowers. Yes, that's the one
That's
we
the
want.
rule.
Yes, that's the rule. Yeah. So, I mean, so there's a whole bunch of different hibiscus, but that's the way to prune most of them. Okay. Next one. Do we need to provide, and we are sort of talked about this already. Do we need to provide shade for tomato plants when it's 110 out? And this is from Zara. So,
Well, that's a good question because you don't want to have so much shade that you stop flowering, but your fruit might burn if it doesn't have enough leaf protection
Yes.
at that temperature.
yeah. So I'm going to say across the board, No, you don't need to shade. But if you have a spindly plant and you're having fruit set, yeah, you probably want to shade it. Not even when it's 110. It's not even so much the heat, it's that sun intensity.
It's the sun.
It's the sun. So it could burn when it's 95, 90. So it's not the heat there. It's our sun it's intense. And so yeah, if you have a small spindly plant that hasn't reached its full potential yet, or you notice any fruit hanging out away from the foliage that could burn, then yeah, and we mentioned you could just throw some shade cloth. You don't want it really anything touching the plant. You want airflow around the plant. So you want to at least use like stakes and put some shade cloth above it if possible, so you have airflow.
Back over at the community garden that I used to be at, there were people who were growing their tomatoes on strings. They essentially would set up a scaffolding and grow the tomatoes up strings and cut off most of the side growth other than the flowering stems. Those needed shade, and they actually had a shade on top of it because that was so completely exposed.
Yeah, there's people who train them almost like a vine, a single leader wrapped up a vertical rope. And then if people who prune them on the sides and then do like the Florida weave, well, you use the string as a way. I had massive failure with the Florida weave.
The Florida weave, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it was not good.
Would this be a good time to talk about me
your espaliering
my tomatoes?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, tell us about that.
So for some reason, I decided to espalier my tomatoes this year. Now, the reason I did that is that I have a deer fence, and the deer fence is essentially just a cable fence, and the cables are about every 10 inches. Now, you might think that, well, why are you putting them on the cables if you have a deer fence? Yeah, I understand that. But I sort of thought it would be fun. So what I've done is I have them growing on stakes about, let's just say, every 2 feet apart or wherever I can fit them in. And then when I start to see a branch come up, I gradually will train that branch to the next cable above. And as they grow, I'm just gently taking them and making them straight so that they are aligned with the cable. The reason I'm doing this is mostly for fun, but I'm also thinking that one of the problems with tomato growing is that by the August, your tomatoes are all over the place. Are they in cages? Are they staked? It doesn't matter. They're everywhere.
Yep.
And I thought, well, what if, since it's just me, what if I just grew them in a way that keeps them nice and clean? I'll get more than enough tomatoes for myself, and I don't have to deal with the mess. So I can actually grow more plants, meaning more varieties, although I'm still only growing 2 varieties. But more importantly, I can grow other things in my limited space vegetable garden. So that's what I'm doing this year, basically for fun and to save space.
And what was my response?
That's because I'm retired and I have time to do it.
Yeah, I think my response was, you got to be kidding me. That is insane. I can't believe you're going to do that. It would be, you miss one day and it's going to be a mess. But then I was like, yes, you're retired. You have time. But then what's happening though? How successful are you right now?
What I noticed is the first time I tried to tie one on, I broke the stem off because I didn't let it get long enough. And maybe I should have done it before the watering, not after, so the plant was a little wilty. But I took that plant, stuck it in the ground, and did nothing more than just stick it in the ground, and now it's a nice tomato plant.
Go ahead.
Well, that's basically it. And now my fruit is delayed, but it's delayed because I planted very late this season. I think I planted like late in May because I had no choice.
And when I was at your house, you were like, oh, it's getting a little more shade. And when a plant's more shaded, it's actually getting elongated internodes, which probably makes it easier to espalier. And if anyone knows, espalier is when you see it on fruit trees when they grow flat on a wall. So you're doing it like they do with grapes.
Right, I'm doing it like with grapes.
With grapes. So we'll see. I'm never going to do it because I just don't have the patience. I shouldn't say never. Maybe one day when I'm retired, I'll do it.
I enjoy going out to my plants and tying them up.
Okay, Bruce.
Sometimes I put them on the railroad track and expect them to pay the rent because after all, I'm paying that water bill.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's fun. That's fun. I just thought you were crazy. Actually,
Well,
anyone who
I'm a crazy
espaliers,
plant person.
anyone who espaliers, I think is crazy because that's going above and beyond because it require those citrus we have at the orchard, those were supposed to be espaliered. And I looked at everyone and I'm like, okay, good luck with that, guys. Yeah, that lasted for like one season. I just removed all the fencing with that. I'm like, that's just insane.
I mean, theoretically, the reason for espalier is because it takes up less space.
Oh, I thought it was to show that you're pretentious and yet you have a gardener and
Well, if you're the
and you're
king
Martha
of
Stewart.
France,
King of France or Martha Stewart.
look what happened to the king of France, and look
And
what happened to
Martha
Martha
Stewart.
Stewart.
Uh-oh, Bruce, what's going to happen?
I'm in trouble.
Yeah, uh-oh. Did Marie Antoinette espalier?
I'm sure she did.
Yes. Okay. Two more questions. We're going to go. We have a low hedge of 20-year-old azaleas and a group of, let me see, 3 are spindly and defoliating. Too much or not enough water? You're the azalea person.
Right. And this is an interesting question
Mhm.
because we have how many azaleas do they have that 3 aren't growing?
Well, they showed me a picture and there's probably about 8 in the picture.
Okay, so that's a large percentage.
Yes. There might be more, but the picture cut off. They're very low. They're only about 2 feet tall and defoliated, yellowing, and all the ones that are doing that are clustered together more in the center.
So I think the first thing is if they're 20 years old, clearly this has been working for them for 20 years and most of them are healthy.
Mhm.
So it's not like they shouldn't be a hedge or anything like
Yeah.
that. So I don't think that someone's been doing something wrong for 20 years. Let's start with that.
Mhm.
But spindling and defoliating, that could be a couple of things. There are azalea diseases. I'm not that familiar with the diseases because,
Yeah.
frankly, when we grew them on the East Coast, there was no diseases evident. They just grew too well.
Wow.
Is it possible that someone did some root pruning in that area because they're all in the same area?
Yeah. So my feeling is anytime I see, especially in a cluster of plants and one's getting spindly, anytime you get anything spindly, even by itself, I always go root. Almost always. If there's no pests, there's no disease above ground, it's a water issue, i.e., usually that's what affects the roots. And so I'm wondering, did something happen? Is there somehow water draining there? Did that soil settle over 20 years and now you have a low spot and all the water's draining there? And that either over time weakens the root system, i.e., there's no oxygen and it's very susceptible to diseases, root diseases, any number of them, or is it literally just rotting off the roots? So I'm assuming there's probably something that took hold in that area, whether it was just happenstance, like the pathogen just took hold there, or because something changed with the drainage and the water, and now it's showing it.
And the other question is always, was it sudden or was it a slow process?
Yeah. I don't know. That I don't know.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that the question of too much or not enough water is, strangely enough, when there's too much water, there still ends up being not enough water at the plant because the roots rot off.
Exactly.
So it's sort of a question that's very difficult for us to answer. But look at the soil.
Yeah, dig down into the soil and dig down under, like, before you water, underneath a healthy one and one of the bad ones, and then after you do your regular watering, do that again. And or maybe 2 days later. And if you have standing water or lots more water, and you hear that sound, one of the ones that are not happy, then you know there's too much water there. And what can you do? Yeah, you might be able to lift the plant up, add some soil and raise it up. That's iffy when you have a very stressed plant, but if it keeps going that way, it's obviously gonna die.
Now, what's really nice about azaleas is that they are amazingly resilient. I dug up some azaleas in my ivy-infested area because I just needed to move them. And I just stuck it on the ground. I did not. I mean, maybe it was in a little indented space. It wasn't in a hole.
Yeah.
Stuck it on the ground. I mean, it didn't even wilt. you can cut azaleas back, not to the ground, but you can cut azaleas way back, and they'll sprout from old wood.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
I mean, that's
That's
one of the
nice.
things that a friend of mine back in Long Island did once. She cut her azaleas way down. I was shocked. Her
Yeah.
rhododendrons also, they came back amazingly.
Wow. Okay. Did she get she didn't get flowers, or did
Not
she
that
do
first year,
not the first year? Yeah.
but
Yeah.
second year,
But still to
they're
reach, yeah.
absolutely
Yeah. I mean, azaleas and where I'm at, it's just the pH is just wrong. They're just gonna die.
right.
Yeah.
And I assume it's not a pH problem because it's only 3.
No,
So,
exactly. And they've been there 20 years, and yeah.
and
Okay.
amazingly, I just want to add one more
Mm-hmm.
thing to that.
Mm-hmm.
Amazingly, if they're all the same and you lose those 3 and you correct your soil problem, you can just take the neighboring azaleas, you can bend the stems down
Mm-hmm.
carefully,
Mm-hmm.
bury them, and they'll root.
Yep. Yeah. Trench layering. Yeah. Yeah. There
Trench
you go.
layering.
There you go. Okay. Last question. My daughter's raspberry leaves are yellow and have green veins and some browning. Why? And this is from Carrie. Now,
Well,
raspberries don't do well in this area. I'm just going to say it. I've seen them grow. I think it's a variety, but generally it's too hot, I think, for them, for raspberries. They just don't
you
do
mean
well.
so she doesn't have a variegated raspberry?
No, it's not a variegated. Yellow and then green veins, yes. So when I hear yellow and green veins, I automatically think iron chlorosis. There's
that's what I was thinking.
magnesium and manganese can also affect that, cause those same symptoms, but generally it is iron. And as you and I both, and probably people who've listened to me long enough, know that it's never, almost always, usually not a lack of iron in the soil. It's a pH issue, meaning your pH is too high and that iron isn't available to the plant. Now, raspberries aren't incredibly known to be an acid-loving plant, but anything could be affected by pH being out of whack. And apparently maybe raspberries are more sensitive than I know because I don't grow them.
Well, there are a lot of raspberries growing by the river, wild raspberries. By the way, it's by the river.
It's raspberries and not blackberries? They're
You know,
blackberries, Bruce.
Maybe they're blackberries.
Yeah, you're from the East Coast. It's
They
blackberries
all look
here.
alike to us.
They do look alike on plant one, but yeah.
Plants look exactly alike.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, no one really. I've known one person who's grown really good raspberries here. It's actually at the student garden at UC Davis, and it's a particular variety. And I got a cutting of it one time, I think, and I don't know what happened. You get cuttings and life happens. I'm like, so I need to go back. But I don't know anyone else who grows raspberries. So definitely add some soil sulfur to drop the pH, or you could add chelated iron, which bypasses the soil and the roots and gets it in there.
That'll act quicker.
That'll act
'cause the
quicker.
sulfur does take a while to work.
Sulfur, but you have your long term and then you have your short fix. So if you keep spraying chelated iron, yes, but blackberries don't seem to care. I mean, I every once in a while, don't you notice on blackberries, every once in a while, you'll get a weird sprig of a leaf or something that has iron chlorosis, like just a random one or two.
I haven't grown them in 20 years,
Okay.
so I can't say. But I will say this. We all love raspberries. They're great. But in a sense, the only thing worse than a poorly growing raspberry is a healthy raspberry, because then you will have a backyard of raspberries.
Oh, yeah. And blackberries too. Yeah.
And blackberries.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
they will take over. And,
Yeah.
with the thorns, it's not going to be fun cleaning out.
Some of them are I have a thornless one.
I like the thornless
Yes,
ones.
I
I
like the
agree with
thornless
that.
ones. And then if
But
you
yeah.
if you grow one as sad as me in an area where the irrigation keeps breaking off, the poor thing is stunted.
So you have bonsai raspberries.
I have bonsai raspberries. I actually they have miniature raspberry plants that you could grow in pots. I gave one to our blackberry plants. I don't know how well they produce. They say they have 2 cycles of them, but when you have a small plant, I don't know how much that is. But yeah, definitely raspberries can, they'd put some of your ivy. I mean, not as thick as your ivy, but they'll give ivy a run for their money.
And
Once
it
they
will
get
be
spread.
much more
It
painful
would
to
be more-
remove those. And I've
Yes.
done it.
Yeah.
Because my garden was taken over by raspberries.
Oh,
Yeah, they were
well,
raspberries.
They were raspberries. Okay.
They were raspberries. And here's an interesting fun fact on raspberries. On the raspberry, when you pull the way you can tell is when you pull the fruit off the raspberry,
Mhm.
you get a little hollow core in the center, and the pedicel or the peduncle, the
Peduncle?
stem of the raspberry
Yeah, the
flower, of
peduncle.
course,
Yeah.
stays.
Uh-huh.
When you
Oh.
pull your blackberry off, the stem comes with it.
Oh, I was just gonna go after color. Blackberries are black, raspberries. No, but
Well,
then
what
you have
about black
myriad.
raspberries?
Then
Which are
you,
my
I know.
favorite.
Oh my God, don't even. Yeah, yeah. Genetically, I know they're. I mean, I I don't know how. I mean, they're similar, obviously, but I don't know how similar. You know how it's like, oh, like yeah. I don't know. But that's it. Those are our questions. Yeah, if you have a question for Bruce or I, you could email Marlene the Plant Lady at gmail.com, or you could email Bruce at brucethebotanist at yahoo.com, and we'll make sure that we answer it on our next question and answer episode, which will be a part of our August to do episode that will come out in August.
Wow,
I know.
August
Yeah.
already?
Yeah. And then just want to say, everyone, if you do like the podcast, the episode, please give us a 5-star rating on Apple and Spotify and leave a nice note. Apparently, that gets, when you do that, when you say nice things and you give a rating, it apparently allows other people to find you. And then, yeah, then we can answer more questions and have more fun on this. But yeah, Bruce, thank you for joining me. You're my new co-host. And this is so much more fun than, I mean, I love talking to guests. Don't get me wrong. That's fun. And I like talking to Joe. Don't get me wrong. That's nice too. But it's nice just talking casually with a friend about gardening. So
You know,
it's,
because that's what plant people are like. We just love talking about plants.
yeah.
And in Marlon's, in my case, cats.
Oh, yes, we haven't even talked about our cat. Well, we'll talk cats. We'll talk cats. Yeah, we haven't even thrown them in there, but yeah. But until next time, everyone. Bruce, you want to sign off and say?
We'll see you next time.
Okay. Until then, happy gardening.